to try to feel that you're here for the benefit of all beings, to create the causes for enlightenment, to be able to help all living beings be free of suffering and its causes, and have happiness in its causes, and lead them as well to the state of enlightenment or awakening. Two of my main teachers, Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche, who are also teachers of Venerable children, put a lot of emphasis on practice, practicing what we learn, rather than just acquiring knowledge. And you can easily get caught up in learning Buddhism. There's so many books and teachings, especially now that there are online teachings. It's like you could be spending 24 hours a day listening to online teachings. And it's, of course, wonderful to do that, to increase one's knowledge and understanding of the Dharma. But we shouldn't just acquire a lot of knowledge and information and not practice. The whole purpose of all these teachings is to practice, to put them into practice. And that is that's the main reason for doing retreat, for having retreats. So in my experience, being a student of Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa, we would often do retreats. And I remember once Lama Yeshe saying that he gave this advice to those of us who are monastics, that we should do a retreat every year. Because it's so easy to get, even if you're in the Dharma, you can get all caught up, all busy doing things, traveling here and there and teaching and going to teachings and building centers and so on. So it's important, really, really important for your own practice and also for your ability to help others, to stop, to have times where you stop and just really focus on practice. Just do a minimum amount of work and do more practice. And Lama Zopa Rinpoche once said that the meaning of retreat, the word retreat can have different meanings, like in war, when an army retreats from the battlefield, maybe they feel like they're losing or they need to recoup, reorganize themselves. So it's like moving back from the battle. And now in our contemporary times, lots of people have this idea of retreat, going to some really peaceful, quiet place like a spa maybe, and, just relaxing, enjoying themselves and being peaceful and getting massages and mud baths and all these kind of things. But in Buddhism, the whole purpose of retreat is, the sense of retreating from, moving away from, getting away from. It shouldn't be like a battle or the world with all its busyness and craziness. But what we're really supposed to retreat from is non-virtue, negative attitudes and ways of behaving, like the 10 non-virtuous actions, and try as much as possible to not let our mind even get caught up in negative attitudes like anger, hatred, greed, jealousy, and so on. I mean, we can't stop those from coming up. You have to be at quite a high level of the path to be able to not have anger or even irritation and these other afflictions to arise in the mind. But at least if we can have enough mindfulness, enough presence of mind and introspective awareness to notice when they do arise in our mind, because they can happen even in a peaceful, quiet place like this. These things can arise because they're so habitual. We have these habitual tendencies, and they don't just stop. Even if we want not to have those in our mind, they can't just stop. So they will still arise even in a retreat situation, but one needs to be mindful, aware, notice when they do arise in the mind, and then try to not let yourself get totally caught up in them. Use some antidotes to deal with them, to manage them, to keep them, subdued rather than affecting your behavior, your speech, and so on. And if you can't do that on your own, then you can ask one of the senior monastics here to give you some help. But yeah, try not to let yourself get carried away in afflictive thoughts and emotions. And especially try not to let them spill over into your behavior, your actions. But even then, that sometimes happens. It's hard to stop. And it's not the end of the world. We're here you're doing the practice of purification, the 35 Buddhas every morning, also in the evening. No, not in the evening, no. But at least once a day, you have the chance to purify that. And also when doing the practice of Chenrezig, when reciting the mantra, you can think of those mistakes that you may have made or afflictive attitudes that you noticed in yourself and imagine, feel regret for them, and then imagine them getting washed out, purified by reciting the mantra. So anyway, the real meaning of retreat is retreating from what is non-virtuous with our body, with our speech, and with our mind as much as we can. We can't be perfect. We're bound to make mistakes. That's part of the practice. We do make mistakes, but at least we can learn from our mistakes, try to, do better next time. And also, it is said that whenever we're practicing Dharma, and that includes being in retreat, whatever problems or difficulties we encounter are actually a positive sign. They're a sign of purification. So it's inevitable. As long as we're in samsara, we're not enlightened beings, we're going to meet problems. These can be physical problems like aches and pains, if you're not used to sitting so many hours. So aches and pains in the body, maybe feeling unwell, tired, hot, cold, hungry, thirsty. So whatever physical difficulties we experience, as well as mental or emotional difficulties, feeling irritated by somebody or not happy to be asked to wash the toilet or whatever, So there's bound to be difficulties, challenges that are encountered during a retreat. And so it's said in the teachings that we shouldn't feel discouraged or upset or happy. Try as much as possible not to let your mind get unhappy and upset about these. And they say that these are actually signs of purification. This is one way in which our karma, negative karma we created in the past, gets purified. And so if you can think that way, if you can accept that idea, you can even feel happy when encountering problems and think, this getting rid of my bad karma, that's good. I have less bad karma to carry around with me. So, and then there's ways we can transform difficulties into the path, bring them into the path and make them part of our practice, such as, just remembering karma. So if you can accept the basic idea of karma, that the actions we do are the cause of experiences we had in the future, we will have in the future. And then in the same way, the experiences we're having now are the result of karma that we created in the past. So we are the person responsible for whatever happens to us. It's not God or other people or other beings, but it's mainly our own karma that determines whether we have good experiences or bad experiences. And so when facing bad experiences, unwanted experiences, we can think, oh, this is what happens if I create bad karma. I don't like this happening. I don't want more of this in the future. So I better, clean up my karma. Really try to avoid doing those actions again as much as I can, and put my energy into virtue, good karma, as much as I can. So use difficulties as a teaching, a lesson in karma, and come out with the determination, the resolution to really live according to karma as much as you can. Avoid non-virtue, create virtue as much as possible. Another thing you can do when facing difficulties is use that to increase your compassion. This is our main focus in this retreat, is generating compassion. So you can contemplate the many other people and many other beings who have problems like the one you're experiencing, but for some of them it's much worse. Hundreds of times worse, millions of times worse. Well, yeah, that's possible. Like, recently we've experienced some heat. It's been kind of hot, but it's been in the 90s, and there's people, in some places it's in the hundreds and over 110 day after day after day. And many people in the world don't have air conditioners. They don't have access to even cool water, or even enough water to be able to take a bath whenever they want to. So thinking about others who are experiencing similar problems, but even worse than ours, gives us a chance to cultivate compassion, to open up our heart and feel compassion, and then use that in our practice. May I practice the Dharma to create the causes to be free of suffering and reach enlightenment, so I can help all other beings to also become free of suffering and enlightened. So there's just a few ideas, a few different practices we can use when we face difficulties. So difficulties don't have to be bad, don't have to get us down. We can. It's said that actually bodhisattvas like problems. When problems come along, they're happy. They think, oh, great. This is a great opportunity to increase my compassion and other qualities, understand emptiness, and so on. And Lama Zopa Rinpoche said, yeah, just the way we feel when we get the chance to eat ice cream, right? Most people like ice cream, so if we have the chance to eat ice cream, we're really, really delighted. And he says, bodhisattvas feel the same way with problems. They like problems in the same way we like ice cream. So that would be nice to get to that point, even enjoying problems. There were a couple of questions that were in the retreat manager's box. I'll take care of those now. So one was, do you have to be a Buddhist nun to receive tantric empowerment? No. You don't have to be a nun. You don't have to be a monk. You can be a layperson, male, female, whatever. And the second question is also a bit similar, so I'll mention that now. How can one receive empowerment in the Chenrezig practice, like the Dalai Lama gave recently? I cannot wait lifetimes for Tantra. The world needs it now. Well, it's not good to rush into Tantra. Tantra is actually the highest level of practice in Buddhism, and it's not even available in all traditions of Buddhism. It's mainly in Tibetan Buddhism. There's some in Japanese Buddhism, but it's quite widespread in Tibetan Buddhism. But it's not something to rush into. It's not something that one should take too early in one's practice. I actually gave a course, a weekend online course on Tantra, Introduction to Tantra, and it's available. Those talks are available on the Abbey website. So anyone who wants to know more about Tantra, we can give you the link, and then when you go home, you can watch those. But before taking a tantric empowerment, it's really important to have the right foundation. And the foundation is in the lamrim, the stages of the path. This is the main thing that we, in our tradition, we study and we meditate on. Some of you may have had the chance to receive teachings or read books on the lamrim. If not, I can recommend some books. There's some books that are relatively small and easy to read. Others are in great detail. But the lamrim contains all the main points we need to learn and meditate on and get some experience of to progress to enlightenment. So it's the stages of the path to enlightenment. And one way of talking about the lamrim, a kind of succinct way, is in what are called the three principal aspects of the path. So these are the three main points of the lamrim. The first one is renunciation. So that, or it's also called the determination to be free. So that involves understanding samsara, or cyclic existence. This is the situation that we are in as ordinary beings, unenlightened beings, where we die and take rebirth again and again. And what's the word I'm trying to find? What causes us to be in samsara and be reborn again and again is mainly karma and afflictions or delusions, mental states that don't see things correctly, don't see things in accordance with reality, and instead see things in distorted ways. So the three main afflictions are ignorance. There's different forms of ignorance. The main one is just not seeing our own real nature and the real nature of everyone and everything else. So we're really like living in darkness, living in ignorance about how things exist. But there's other forms of ignorance as well, like ignorance of karma, not knowing that the actions we do will bring results in the future. So many people in the world are totally unaware of that. And so even though, it's just so sad, it's so tragic, everyone wants happiness, everyone wants good experiences, and nobody wants suffering, nobody wants bad experiences. And yet, because of ignorance of karma, many people are creating the causes of suffering, like killing, stealing, and so forth, and avoiding the causes of happiness, like being generous and being ethical and so on and so forth. And so ignorance of karma, not understanding karma, is a huge problem, and one we need to try to clear up in ourselves and do what we can to help others be free of it as well. So anyway, ignorance is one of the main afflictions in the mind. And then the other two of this group, called the three poisons, are anger, which has different shades, different degrees. There's the kind of anger that leads people to commit acts of violence, like killing and acts of terrorism and so on. But there's also milder forms of anger, like just feeling annoyed, feeling irritated, feeling dislike, impatient, and so on. So this is a problem we all have. And if we're not careful, it can kind of take over our mind, and then we find ourselves acting it out, and in our speech or in our actions. And that way we create karma, negative karma that's the cause of suffering. And then the third one is attachment, also known as desire, and that also has different shades. Probably the strongest form is addictive craving. Yeah, when people are addicted to a substance or behavior, and they just can't stop, even if they know that it's not helpful for them and helpful for others, but they just can't stop themselves. And then, milder forms of that would just be like attachment to coffee or attachment to chocolate or attachment to movies, or, it may not be particularly harmful for our health or our mental well-being, but it's still, it's not a healthy state of mind, and it leads to suffering, it leads to problems, and it's an obstacle to our spiritual development. So, as ordinary beings, we have these in our mind. We have these three poisons: ignorance, anger or aversion, and attachment or craving, clinging. And they're present on a daily basis, again and again and again. And under their influence, the actions that we do are such that they just keep us in samsara, in this situation of dying and being reborn and experiencing various problems, unpleasant, unwanted experiences in samsara. So there's a lot of teachings. I'm just saying this in a brief way, but a lot of teachings about samsara, the nature of samsara, how it is in the nature of suffering, unsatisfactoriness. Dukkha is the term in Sanskrit and Pali. So it's a really unsatisfactory situation. Even the pleasant experiences, people always say, but things, life isn't all that bad. There's lots of good things, lots of beautiful things. Yes. But do they last? Yeah. Happiness and pleasure, nice experiences, do they last? Maybe a few seconds, few minutes, few hours, few days, few years. Eventually, they finish. So they're not fully satisfying. They're not able. The pleasures, the happiness, the beautiful things, the wonderful things in samsara are not able to give us lasting, genuine satisfaction and happiness. They're like rainbows or like dreams or like illusions, They're there for a little while and then they're gone and we're left. So we need to learn about and then contemplate the nature of this situation that's called samsara or cyclic existence, and come to see that I got to get out of here. This is not a good situation to be in. It's sometimes compared to an ocean. They say it's like being in an ocean full of all kinds of creatures, dangerous creatures and other kinds of dangers. I like the analogy of a prison. It's like a prison, or even worse, a concentration camp. So if you found yourself in a prison or a concentration camp, you wouldn't think, oh, this is nice. I'm going to settle down here and enjoy myself. You just want to get out. Every second, every moment, your mind is thinking, how do I get out of here? I got to get out of here. So that's the attitude we need to generate with regard to samsara, unenlightened existence, cyclic existence. So that's the meaning of renunciation, or the determination to be free. So we need to learn about samsara, contemplate it, meditate on it, and generate that state of mind, which could take time. And then that's the first. So that's the first of the three principal aspects of the path. The second one is bodhicitta, and that is the aspiration to become a Buddha, fully enlightened, to help all living beings. Because with the first attitude, renunciation, the determination to be free of samsara, for some, and this is something that the Buddha taught, it's a valid path within Buddhism, the path that leads just to liberation from samsara or nirvana. So that means, we are thinking, I just want to get out of samsara, free myself from karma and afflictions, and attain the state of nirvana, meaning I don't have to suffer anymore, I don't have any more rebirths, any more karma, any more afflictions. I've freed myself from that situation. So that is a valid path, and there are Buddhist practitioners aspiring for that, working for that, and it's perfectly fine. It's great. It's fantastic. But it's not the Bodhisattva path. So our tradition, the Tibetan tradition, as well as most of the East Asian traditions, have the tradition of Mahayana, Mahayana Buddhism, and this is the path leading to not just nirvana for ourselves, but leading to enlightenment, full enlightenment, Buddhahood, or awakening. And so that's done because of compassion and love and the wish to benefit others. So the thinking there is, it's great to get myself out of samsara, to free myself from samsara, but what about everybody else? There's still all these other beings who are in samsara. Do I just leave and not do anything to help them? So someone who's inclined towards the Mahayana, the Bodhisattva path, would think, no. If you think about it, if you and your family and friends were all locked up in a concentration camp together, and you managed to find a way out, you got out, would you feel good about just walking away and then living your life and not doing anything to help those who are still in the camp? Wouldn't feel quite right. So that's the way that one thinks who's on this bodhisattva path, especially as we're going to look at, because we're going to be looking at the methods for developing bodhicitta. And so one of the reflections that we do is how everybody has been helpful to us. We have actually received help and kindness and benefit from other people, other beings, in this life and also in all our past lives. And we will continue to receive help from others in our future lives as well. So we are actually completely dependent on others for everything, for our body, our life, our food, our clothes, our medicine, our shelter, and also our Dharma practice. We wouldn't be able to practice Dharma and progress along the path if it weren't for other people and other beings. So this is something we meditate on, we contemplate, and that really strengthens this sense that I can't just leave all these beings behind and bring myself to nirvana and then just sit there and enjoy myself and bliss out. So bodhicitta then is like an extension of renunciation, an extension of the determination to be free, in the sense that we do have to develop that attitude. We do have to see the unsatisfactory nature of samsara and want to get out, want to get ourselves out. But then we extend that very same attitude to everybody else as well. We think, just as I want to be free of samsara, and I should be free of samsara, and I'm determined to get myself out of samsara, the same goes for everybody else. And I will take on the responsibility to do whatever it takes to help all sentient beings to be free of samsara as well. And what it takes is to become a Buddha, because, right now, as we are, our ability to help others is severely limited. Sometimes we can't even help ourselves. So it's wonderful to have that wish, that aspiration to help all sentient beings. But practically speaking, we need to work on ourselves. We need to develop our qualities and our abilities to be able to help others. And so you think about, well, what can I do to help others? What is the best way to help others? And you learn about Buddhahood or enlightenment, awakening, whatever you want to call it, that state that the Buddha achieved. And all the qualities that you have, all the abilities you have when you're in that state, and you become convinced that that is what it takes, that is what I need to do to be able to help all other beings. So that's when bodhicitta arises. Bodhicitta is this thought or attitude or determination to reach that state of enlightenment, Buddhahood, for the benefit of all living beings. So it takes time. We'll be looking during this retreat at methods, different meditations that help generate that state of mind of bodhicitta. Initially, we have to make effort to generate that state of mind. It doesn't just come naturally, spontaneously. We have to think our way into it. But after doing that again and again and again over a long period of time, you get to the point where it rises naturally, spontaneously by itself. They say in the same way, like if you haven't eaten for hours and you're really, really hungry, thoughts of food will just naturally pop up into your mind. You don't have to decide, I should think about eating something. Thoughts will just spontaneously rise in your mind. So in a similar way, when the thought of attaining enlightenment to be able to help sentient beings just pops up in your mind naturally, spontaneously, without you having to make any effort at all, at that point, that's the point at which you are a bodhisattva. That's the criteria of being a bodhisattva, when you have spontaneously arising, naturally arising bodhicitta. But, before that, it's still great, to work at bringing up that thought in our mind, using the methods to bring it up. And, but it's not real bodhicitta at that point in time. It's kind of contrived or artificial, but it's still good, of course. And we have to go through that process, that procedure to get to the point of it being uncontrived and spontaneous. So anyway, that's the second of the three principal aspects of the path, bodhicitta. And that's absolutely necessary for the practice of tantra, because that is the only motivation, the only correct motivation that one should have for practicing tantra. So it doesn't have to be the effortless bodhicitta, but at least effortful, at least the contrived bodhicitta. Before you start engaging in tantric practice. And then the third of the three principal aspects of the path is, it's called right view, but it means the understanding of emptiness. And that's, again, not easy. It takes time. We need to hear teachings on emptiness, study them, discuss them, clear up our doubts, our questions, meditate on them, and gradually come to an understanding of emptiness, and meaning all things, all phenomena. That includes all beings, ourself, everyone else, and all the things in the world, both in samsara and beyond samsara. Everything that exists is empty of existing in a certain way, and that way is often called inherent existence or true existence or independent existence. I like that one. For me, that makes the most sense. So as ordinary beings, unenlightened beings in samsara, ignorance, we have this ignorance in our mind, which has always been there. Nobody put it there. As long as our mind has been existing, ignorance has been a part of our mind. And this type of ignorance, the deepest root type of ignorance, causes us to see everything as if it was independently existing, as if it could stand by itself without depending on anything else, as if things, have some kind of real fixed way of existing out there, over there, from their own side, independent of causes and conditions, other kinds of factors that bring them into existence, independent of parts that make them up, and also independent of our mind, how our mind perceives them and relates to them and names them, designates them, and so on. So we have this way of seeing things which is actually totally false. It doesn't exist at all. It's like a fabrication, a false mode of existence. And yet most people, most beings are totally unaware that they are seeing things mistakenly. And instead, we just believe that things exist the way they appear. We never question that. So the Buddhism asks us to question how things appear to us, and do they exist in that way? And if we do this properly, we'll get to the point where we realize that no, things don't exist the way they appear to us. That false mode of existence is actually not there. It's just fabricated by the mind. And that's the meaning of realizing emptiness, that things are empty of this false mode of existence. So this is a really difficult topic. It's one of the most difficult topics in the whole of Buddhism. It takes a lot of time to even start to get a little inkling of what it's all about. But it is important to, at least have some understanding of emptiness, because again, in the practice of Tantra, you're doing a lot of visualization, like, visualizing deities, also visualizing yourself as a deity. All of that needs to be done on the basis of understanding emptiness. Yeah, understanding that things are empty of our ordinary way of seeing them. And so if you don't have that understanding, at least, in an intellectual way, then the practice of Tantra that you're doing isn't really proper, isn't correct, isn't taking you in the right direction. So this is just a very brief explanation of very complicated topics. But the point I'm trying to make is, before jumping into Tantra and taking tantric initiations and doing tantric practices, you do have to have a good understanding of those three principal aspects of the path, which are the main features, the three main topics within the Lam Rim. So it is good to receive teachings. That's the ideal thing. Listen to teachings, but also read, study on your own, think about, meditate on these topics in the Lam Rim, and have a good basis in that before taking tantric initiations. And there's still some, to a certain extent, some practices of Tantra that we can do without having an initiation. For example, this one that we're doing, visualizing Chenrezig outside of ourselves, like in the space above our head, and doing the prayers and reciting the mantra and doing the visualizations of the light coming and purifying. So that's something that can be done without receiving an initiation. So there's a lot you can do without having initiation. It isn't that, before receiving an initiation, you can't do anything to benefit yourself and to benefit the world. And so that's one thing to consider. And then the question is actually asking, when can I get an empowerment? So the last 2 years, the Dalai Lama has been teaching in Ladakh and giving this Avalokiteshvara empowerment and giving permission. Normally, you're supposed to be physically present to receive an empowerment. You have to be in the room and following the initiation, following all the visualizations and the prayers and so on. But he's given permission for people to watch online. And as long as you're watching live rather than afterwards, you're sitting there live while the initiation is happening, and you're participating, following the visualizations, the prayers, and so on, then you can receive the initiation in that way. So there's a good chance he'll do it again next year. I'm sure the Ladakhi people will invite him. I'm sure they already have invited him to come back to Ladakh. And you can see he's really happy to be there teaching people. So there's a good chance, if all goes well, that it'll happen again next year. So you may have a chance. And even before that, sometimes he gives initiations in Dharamsala or in other places. So there will be opportunities. I don't think you need to worry about having to wait lifetimes. But the important thing is to prepare yourself by learning the Lamrim, meditating on the Lamrim. And again, don't be in a hurry. Yeah, take your time. I mean, I think some of the people here in the Abbey have been learning and practicing Buddhism for years, but maybe still haven't taken initiation, or maybe just recently for the first time took an initiation. So it's better to prepare yourself mentally before taking that step. So that was a rather long answer. And then one more question is, if you don't have mala beads, can you count on your fingers? That's hard. And there are malas in, what do you call that room downstairs? Yeah, there's this little room downstairs in the corner that has books and also malas, and it's all by donation. So there's lots of lovely malas down there, even crystal ones like Chenrezig has. They're kind of heavy. So there's also wooden ones if you like something lighter. Yeah, so you don't have to count on your fingers. Okay, so you had the experience this morning of doing the practice of Chenrezig, and I wanted to talk a little bit more about that. I didn't finish last night, but just to give some advice about visualization, because I think many people have difficulty with visualization. Some people don't. I've encountered some people who do it really easily. Maybe people who are more artistic by nature, who have some experience in the arts, and they can very easily do elaborate visualizations. But many people have difficulty, including myself, and really struggle with it. So if you do have difficulty with visualization, don't worry, don't feel bad, and try not to get into thoughts like, oh, I can't do this, it's too hard. It's something that we can learn. So the more we do it, then the more easy it becomes. And it's also important to try to not have unrealistic expectations of yourself. Like, I should be able to have a perfectly clear visualization of every single detail, and it will remain there the whole time I'm meditating. I mean, that's just not realistic. So try not to expect that. And instead just think, okay, I'm going to try this, and I'm just going to do the best that I can. But if I can't see it clearly, if I can't see every detail, that's okay. It's okay. Just the important thing is to just do what you can and be happy with whatever you're able to do. And the more you practice, the more you do this kind of practice, the easier it gets. So I think each person also needs to kind of find how to do it in a way that works for them. I mean, it definitely helps to look at pictures, images, really look at them, study them, make your mind familiar with the details, and that will help to be able to have the visualization. We're trying to get pictures of, I don't know when they're going to come, but if everyone had a little picture on their table, then that would help. Oh, they already came. Oh, that was fast. Okay. So everyone does have a little picture of Chenrezig in color, right? Okay. So you can look at that to help with the visualization. But, visualization is something we do with our mind, not with our eyes. So initially we use our eyes to look at the image and get familiar with the details. But then we have to use our mind to recreate that image. So it's a mental image, not a visual one. And so it's it's a skill that we need to train ourselves in, and give yourself time. Don't push yourself. Try to be relaxed and stay happy, and not get, unhappy and uptight if it doesn't work the way you want it to. And I always tell people, and I hope this is true, that the important thing is to feel the presence of the deity. So even if you're not able to visualize all the details, even if you're not able to visualize anything, it's just blank, or you get the visualization and then it disappears, that's okay. But if you can feel that Chenrezig is there, or the Buddha, whatever it is you're visualizing, that they are there, because like I said last night, the teachings say that there are many Buddhas and Bodhisattvas around us all the time. And the more we can purify our mind, clear up our karma and our afflictions, the more we'll be able to start seeing them and experiencing their presence. So if you can try to have maybe a leap of faith. Hard to really be convinced of that initially, but with more time, more study, more practice, it will become easier to feel, they are there. And try to feel that way. Try to feel that Chenrezig really is there. There are enlightened beings who care about you, want to help you, and if you think of them, focus your mind on them, pay attention to them, they will be there for you. So try to feel that way. And also to feel the qualities of Chenrezig. That's, again, the most important thing. Not so much the visualization, but the qualities, like especially compassion. This mind that is aware of all sentient beings throughout the universe and their sufferings, their problems, and understanding their suffering, having empathy and compassion, just totally dedicated to helping each sentient being to be free of suffering and its causes, which are mainly non-virtue and afflictions and so on. And so that means us. We are one of those sentient beings. So this is really helpful because many people in the West especially don't have very good feelings about themselves. Many people suffer from low self-esteem and even self-hatred, self-criticalness. So, this voice inside that's criticizing ourselves, putting ourselves down, always feeling we don't live up to whatever expectations we have of ourselves. Usually other people are accepting of us more than we are accepting of ourselves. So many people suffer from those kinds of attitudes. So it's really helpful to think of Chenrezig and feel Chenrezig isn't judging us. Chenrezig doesn't look down on us. He can see all of our faults better than we can see ourselves. But there's no judgment. There's no aversion. There's no criticalness. None of that. Just total love and compassion and acceptance and forgiveness and patience, no matter what we do. So that's really helpful to think about that and try to feel that. It's a good way to learn to love ourselves, have more love and compassion for ourselves. So just try not to get discouraged if you find it difficult to visualize, and just play around and try to find ways that would help you to have a better visualization, or at least a feeling, a sense of the presence of Chenrezig. And then I wanted to talk about the mantra. So could the thing go up on the screen? The meaning of the mantra. Can you read that, or it's too small? Maybe make it bigger. Yeah. This is from a teaching given by the Dalai Lama in a book called Kindness, Clarity, and Insight. So mantras are always in Sanskrit, even though when Buddhism went from India to Tibet, they translated most of the teachings into Tibetan, but they kept the mantras in Sanskrit. So there's something about Sanskrit it's considered a sacred language, a holy language, and just the sounds of Sanskrit syllables are said to be very beneficial for us, purifying our mind. And so it's not really necessary to understand the meaning of a mantra. That won't make a difference. But many people like to know the meaning of it. So the first syllable is Om, and most mantras start with Om. And Om doesn't really have a meaning, like, a specific, something you can translate, but it's said to refer to enlightened body, speech, and mind. So the body, speech, and mind of an enlightened being, awakened being, a Buddha, is what's represented by the Om. And that is what it is we're trying to achieve, our goal, what we want to get to. Mani means jewel. And here it represents the method side of the path. I mentioned last night there's these two sides of the path. One is called method, the other is wisdom. And the method side of the path includes compassion, love, bodhicitta, doing actions to benefit others, like generosity, helping the sick, building bridges, writing books, whatever. Yeah, the different activities one does out of compassion to benefit others. So that whole side of the path is represented by mani, or jewel. Padme means lotus, but here it represents wisdom, the wisdom side of the path. And like last night I mentioned that the lotus is a sort of symbol in Buddhism for enlightened mind, because an enlightened being starts out in the world as an ordinary being, but rises up above the world, just like a lotus starts off in this muddy pond, but rises above the water and is totally pure, with free of any faults or stains. And so it's a nice symbol for enlightenment, and in particular the wisdom of an enlightened being, the mind that understands how things exist, that things are empty of the way we normally see them. Our normal perception of things is not accurate, is not correct. So the wisdom that sees everything correctly, exactly as it is. So that's represented by the lotus, Padme. The final syllable is Hum, and you often find that at the end of mantras. And again, it isn't something that can be translated, but the Dalai Lama said it refers to the indivisibility of method and wisdom, the union of method and wisdom, those two sides of the path. Both of those are necessary to develop for our mind to reach enlightenment. So the sum of all of that is the 6 syllables Om Mani Padme Hum mean that independence on the practice of a path, which is an indivisible union of method and wisdom, you can transform your impure body, speech, and mind into the pure, exalted body, speech, and mind of a Buddha. So in a shorter way, if we develop those two aspects of the path, method, the compassion side, and wisdom, we will be able to transform ourselves and attain the state of enlightenment, awakening, the state of a Buddha with the enlightened body, speech, and mind of a Buddha. So if you find it helpful to contemplate that while reciting the mantra, that's fine. But there are other visualizations that can be done while there's different things you can do while you're reciting a mantra, because sometimes in our practices we may spend a lot of time reciting mantras, sometimes hours, and to prevent the mind from being bored or falling asleep or wandering, then it's good to do different practices. So one practice you can think about the meaning of the mantra. You can think about compassion, like when you're imagining the light going out from Chenrezig to all the sentient beings. You can really, think about different beings in different situations and the kind of suffering that they're experiencing, and really feel compassion for them and imagine the light going to them and purifying them of that suffering and the causes of it, the karma and afflictions that cause that suffering. So you could keep yourself very busy doing that. There's so many sentient beings and so many different kinds of problems they're having. So so that's a very effective thing to do while reciting the mantra. And yesterday I watched this little video. It was a recorded talk given by the former head of the Sakya tradition. This is one of the 4 traditions in Tibetan Buddhism. His title is His Holiness Sakya Gongma Trichen. Long title. But anyway, he's really a wonderful teacher, very senior teacher. And he was talking about this very practice that we're doing. He gave a teaching on this sadhana of written by Tangtong Gyalpo. And it seems like he started off saying that he was asked to give this talk because of these troubled times, all these problems with the pandemic. So it may have been given a couple of years ago. And they had really big problems in India where he lives. Many, many people getting sick and dying. And so he said this is a really good practice to do during troubled times. So that's why he gave the teaching and the mantra and so on. And it was really sweet. He talked about how in Tibet, even little kids, as soon as they start talking, will start learning this mantra. Even if they can't say the whole mantra, they just say, Om Ma Mam. And then, later on, they'll learn the rest of the syllables and be able to say the whole thing. But, even as little kids, they start learning this mantra and reciting this mantra. So he said it'd be very hard to find a Tibetan who doesn't know this mantra and doesn't say this mantra. That's a very popular one. And he said that this mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum, contains the essence of all the 84,000 teachings of the Buddha. Wow. Yeah, so it said that Buddha gave 84,000 teachings. And there's an organization called 84,000 that is dedicated to translating all those teachings into other languages, starting with English. So then he says, so how is that? How is it that this short 6-syllable mantra contains the essence of the 84,000 teachings of the Buddha? And he said, there's this kind of common theme in Tibetan Buddhist teachings where they talk about basis, path, and fruit. Basis is like where we're at. This is where we are. This is the basis we have. And then the path is what leads us out of this situation, beyond this situation. And then the fruit is the result, what it is we are trying to achieve, which is enlightenment. And so he said, all of that's contained in this mantra. So it is said that this first syllable, Om, it does represent enlightened body, speech, and mind, but it can also represent our own body, speech, and mind. Because they say the syllable Om, when you write it in Tibetan, I think also in Sanskrit, it has 3 parts to it, 3 elements to it. So each of those 3 represents one of the 3 aspects of our being, body, speech, and mind. So the Om can represent our own unenlightened, impure body, speech, and mind, which has the ability to transform into the enlightened body, speech, and mind. So that's the basis. So the Om then represents this basis, what we have to work with, our body, speech, and mind. And then the path is represented by Mani and Padme, the method side of the path and the wisdom side of the path. So by cultivating and practicing compassion and also wisdom, we will be able to transform ourselves, purify ourselves, transform ourselves, eventually reaching enlightenment. And he said in his explanation, he said the Hum, the last syllable, refers to Buddhahood. So it's a little bit different from what His Holiness the Dalai Lama said. But yeah, you often find many different explanations of things, and they're not contradictory. They're just different ways of saying the same things. So he said, then the basis, the path, and the fruit, the result that we're trying to achieve, are all contained within this one mantra. And then there's also lists of benefits of reciting Om Mani Padme Hum. So I think that's on the next. So these are just, that one. These are just some of the benefits. But Lama Zopa Rinpoche said, the benefits are infinite, like the sky. But just to give some examples. So reciting, if we recite Om Mani Padme Hum, it purifies our negative karma and also enables us to attain all the stages of the path to enlightenment. So it clears away the negative stuff, like our negative karma that is the cause of suffering and keeps us stuck in samsara. So that gets purified. And we also create the causes to follow the path, the steps of the path, stages of the path leading to enlightenment. But of course, this depends on reciting it with the right motivation. Motivation is always important. So that's why we hear, for example, we're always reminding ourselves of our motivation of bodhicitta, and doing our best to live according to that motivation. And then another benefit is always having good conditions for Dharma practice, meaning, in this life and in our future lives. So in this life, we're very fortunate that we have all the conditions that we do. We've met teachers, spiritual teachers. We have access to lots of teachings in books and online courses and videos and so on. So we're really, really fortunate to have the chance to learn the Dharma and also to be able to practice it. Places like here where we can come and practice together. There's lots of centers, Dharma centers in many different parts of the world where we can learn Dharma and practice Dharma together with friends. So it also mentions meeting virtuous friends. So virtuous friends, that term sometimes refers to teachers, but it can also refer to fellow practitioners, people who are like-minded, who want to practice the Dharma and transform themselves, do good, avoid non-virtue, and so on. So it's really helpful to have people like that around us. It's hard to practice on your own. I'm sure some of you know that. If you're living in places where there's nobody else who wants to follow this path and live this way, then it's quite hard. So it's really helpful to have other people you can practice together with, support each other, talk about Dharma and help each other and so on. So that's another important condition. And then being in a place where there are holy objects and also people who are practicing Dharma. So that's really helpful as well. Like, holy objects means like statues, images of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, stupas that represent enlightened mind. So these objects, in relation to such objects, if we make offerings, make prayers, or even just sitting and meditating in the presence of these objects, it's very beneficial for our mind. It's a way of creating a lot of merit, a lot of virtue, good karma. And just, being a source of inspiration, a reminder that there are holy beings, there are enlightened beings, represented by these holy objects. And then having resources. So that's also important. We have to have food and shelter and clothes. If we're lacking in resources, then life is really hard. It's hard just to survive, much less have leisure time to learn and practice the Dharma. So we don't want to be billionaires, millionaires. That's not necessary. But to have enough that you don't have to worry about where your next meal is coming from, and you have enough peace of mind that you can just focus on your practice. So by doing this practice, reciting this mantra, we're creating the causes to have all these conditions in our future lives as well. And then next one is you will have good ethical conduct and subdued behavior. So that's really important, that our way of behaving, our way of living is ethical. Buddhist ethics is basically based on compassion, understanding that nobody wants to suffer, and deciding I will do my best not to cause anyone to suffer. I will refrain from actions that cause suffering to others, like killing them and harming them physically and speaking in hurtful ways to them and even disturbing their minds if I behave in a crazy way. So just trying to live our life in a way that we don't cause harm or suffering to others, and instead benefit them, do what's beneficial for others. So that's the basis for ethics in Buddhism. So trying to live in a non-harmful way, in a beneficial way as much as we can. So reciting this mantra will help us purify any obstacles to living in such a way and help us to live that way more. And then you will always live in a good environment and have harmonious relationships with others. So, doing this practice of Chenrezig and reciting Om Mani Padme Hum will help our compassion and our love and our patience to grow. And then in our relationships with other people, it also partly depends on them. If they are 100% hostile and don't budge from that, then it's difficult. But at least in our mind, our attitude towards others, we'll learn how to be compassionate and patient and try to avoid provoking them as much as we can. But it does help us in our relationships to be more harmonious. And then it says, in all lifetimes you will be born in a country where a Buddha is present, so you can receive Dharma teachings. So that's really important, to be able to, even if we can't meet a Buddha, well, maybe we do meet Buddhas and we just don't know them, because Buddhas and Bodhisattvas can manifest in forms like our teachers and other forms as well. So having the chance to meet Buddhas and learn the path and be inspired to follow it. So those are just some of the benefits, and it's good to contemplate those, and that will hopefully give enthusiasm, energy to do this practice. Mantras can also be helpful as a way to calm our mind down. Like when our mind sometimes gets agitated, or if we're in a scary situation, dangerous situation, and all these thoughts are shooting around in our mind. Having a mantra that we know, that we've recited many times and we're very familiar with, if we can think of that mantra and recite that mantra, then it can help our mind to calm down and bring more presence and clarity to our mind. And also, if you can feel confident that Chenrezig, or whatever deity it is always present, is always aware of you. And so thinking of Chenrezig or thinking of Tara, whatever deity it is, and feeling that they are there present with you, with their soothing and compassionate and wise presence and energy, then that is also helpful to stay calm and clear and be able to deal with that situation more productively than just So that's another kind of an immediate benefit of learning a mantra, and this is such an easy one. It's so short, so it's easy to bring to mind and start reciting. So if you make a habit of that, if you do a lot of recitations of Om Mani Padme Hum, especially on a daily basis, even just one mala a day can be very helpful. Just to familiarize your mind with this mantra. And then when you find yourself in a scary situation or a disturbing situation, bringing that to mind, reciting that, can really give you immediate benefit. Okay, so I will talk more later about the practice. There's still a few things we didn't cover, like the 7-limb prayer, mandala offering. I'd like to do that later, but because I did want to start talking about bodhicitta and the methods for developing bodhicitta. So there is, just keep going. Well, a little bit, the first thing. What is bodhicitta? Can you do it? Doesn't work. Uh-oh. Anyway, doesn't matter. There we go. So for those who might not be familiar, the term bodhicitta, it's a Sanskrit term, and bodhi means enlightenment. It's enlightenment or awakening, the state that the Buddha achieved. And citta is a word for mind. And so a literal translation is mind of enlightenment. But that doesn't really convey what it means. So as I explained earlier, it's the wish or aspiration or determination to reach enlightenment, awakening, the state the Buddha achieved, for the benefit of others. Not just for our own benefit. Of course, we'll benefit. We'll get a lot of benefit by reaching enlightenment, but that shouldn't be our main goal, our main purpose. The main purpose is helping others. And so it's said that bodhicitta consists of 2 aspirations: the aspiration to help all living beings, and then the aspiration to attain enlightenment. So we cultivate those 2 aspirations, and when this thought of attaining enlightenment to help all living beings is something that arises naturally and spontaneously without having to make any effort, that's when we actually have bodhicitta. And up to that time, we have to meditate or think our way into that state of mind, but that's still very good. But the real meaning of bodhicitta is when it arises spontaneously. So in the Lamrim, the stages of the path, bodhicitta isn't taught right at the beginning. It's mentioned, but initially there's other contemplations, other material that we learn about and meditate on prior to bodhicitta, such as what I talked about earlier, renunciation or determination to be free. So we need to understand the situation we are in. You know, most people don't realize that they are in a unsatisfactory situation. And their minds are afflicted with disturbing emotions, and they're creating karma and creating suffering for themselves and also for others. So we need to, you know, get a good understanding of that situation and generate this wish, this determination to be free of it. So that is a necessary prerequisite for bodhicitta, because if we don't even realize how we are in a terrible situation and want to get ourselves out of it, how can we possibly feel that way towards others? Yeah. So we start with ourselves. We have to recognize we're in a bad place and we don't deserve to be here. And we don't have to be here. We do have a choice. If we want to get out, we can. And so we really ideally spend quite a bit of time thinking about all the various disadvantages, the sufferings, the unsatisfactory conditions of samsara. And the more we contemplate that, then the more will that attitude build up of, I must get out, I have to get myself out. And just making that, ideally, you get to the point where that is your main priority. I have to get myself out of samsara, rather than I want to enjoy myself in samsara, make as much money as I can, and become rich and famous, and all those things. So those things kind of fall away. You lose interest in those, and feel content with having, as you know, just what you need to survive. And if you have people dependent on you, then of course you need to take care of them. But not excessive. You know, you no longer are interested in the material pursuits that most people in the world are. And instead, your main pursuit, your main concern is following the path, practicing the Dharma to be free. So we need to develop that state of mind, which is usually called renunciation or the determination to be free. But it could also be called self-compassion. That isn't normally mentioned in the traditional teachings, but both Venerable Children and I sort of came to that conclusion that renunciation is really self-compassion. And it's the best kind of self-compassion. It's not the kind of self-compassion where you just, you know, go for massages and take bubble baths and, you know, be nice to yourself. But, you know, if we really have compassion for ourselves, that means we want ourselves to be free of suffering. Not just short-term, temporary suffering, but this whole situation we are in, which is suffering, unsatisfactory. You know, having afflictions and karma in our mind, causing us to experience problems over and over and over again, die and take rebirth in samsara over and over again. I mean, this is not a good situation. We shouldn't have to stay in this. So if we really have compassion for ourselves, we want to get ourselves out of this situation and to a situation of genuine, lasting peace and happiness. So it's kind of the ultimate form of self-compassion. So we do need to work on that and develop that. as a basis for bodhicitta, because then once we clearly understand the situation of samsara and how we need to get ourselves out of it, then we can apply that to others. I mean, that doesn't mean we have to have 100% effortless renunciation before we start developing bodhicitta. You don't have to do that, but at least a good understanding, a good grasp of the situation of samsara and the need to get ourselves out of it, because then we think about other people and other beings and how they are in samsara, and it will be easy, kind of easy, to generate that same feeling towards them. They deserve to be free as well, and I have to do what I can to help them get out. So it does take effort to generate bodhicitta. We do have to spend time and energy learning about it, meditating on it. And if we understand the benefits of bodhicitta, then hopefully that will give us energy to do this. So let's go through these. We don't have much time left, but just quickly go through some of the benefits of bodhicitta. And some of these are in the Lamrim text, but some are from Volume 5, which I very much recommend, Volume 5 of the Library of Wisdom and Compassion. It's called In Praise of Great Compassion. And in that volume of this series that Venerable Children is working on, contains all about bodhicitta and the four immeasurable thoughts and the different ways of developing bodhicitta. It's really fantastic. So if you want to know more about this topic, you can find them in there. So in there, His Holiness Dalai Lama kind of adds some additional methods to, additional benefits to the traditional ones. So let's see how many of these we can go through. First one, this is one of the traditional ones. It says, bodhicitta is the gateway to the Mahayana, which is also called the great or the universal vehicle. So Mahayana is the path that leads to Buddhahood. And if we want to attain Buddhahood, we want to become a Buddha, we have to follow this path. And the entrance to that path is actually bodhicitta. So if we don't develop bodhicitta, if, making an analogy, Mahayana is like an airplane that will take you somewhere where you want to go, like maybe Paris. And you can't get on an airplane if you don't have a ticket, right? You can't just say, oh, I want to take this flight. Where's your ticket? So we have to have a ticket to get on a flight. So in the same way, we need bodhicitta to be able to board the Mahayana vehicle, the great vehicle, and travel that to enlightenment. So it's essential. And then second is you can easily accumulate extensive merit and purify many negativities. Okay, so this is two things we need to do to be able to progress to whatever goal we want. We have to clear away the obstacles that prevent us from getting there, and we have to accumulate the good energy, the positive energy that will enable us to make progress. So by, even just trying to cultivate bodhicitta, even just spending a few minutes trying to generate that thought, or a few minutes meditating on love, compassion, and so on, we create so much merit, so much virtue, and purify so much negativity. So even if you don't have a lot of time, a lot of energy, and maybe your knowledge, your level of understanding isn't that high, but any little effort we make to cultivate bodhicitta, and of course also try to bring it into our life, try to live our life according to bodhicitta, try to be more kind and more compassionate. It's so powerful for clearing away what's negative and accumulating what's positive and helpful. So I'll stop there. I'm not going to get through all of these, so I'll continue in the afternoon. And then we'll start to look at, we'll start to go into the actual way, the steps to follow to develop bodhicitta. So if you have questions for me, you can write them on paper and leave them here. I may not be able to answer all of them right away, but I will try to get to them. There's no question and answer session today, right? Today is... Yeah. So, yeah, today is a silent day. We'll be in silence all day. And in the afternoon, there'll be a meditation session. And then tomorrow afternoon, there'll be a question and answer session and also a discussion. So these will be on alternate days. So I think it's good, like on the first day, to have silence, because probably many of you were busy getting ready to come here and then traveling here, and it takes a while to settle down. So if you find your mind is still thinking a lot about last week, what you did before you came, that's normal. Those thoughts will settle down. And also tiredness. You might be very tired because this is quite a different schedule, different pace than what you've been used to. So sometimes the body needs time as well to settle down. So don't worry if you fall asleep in meditation. That's normal. But try not to. And if you do fall asleep, or you feel sleepy, it's good to sit up straight. Try not to slouch. Open your eyes. Meditate with your eyes open. Those can help. Okay, so let's dedicate.